Welcome to the Stormsurf video surf forecast for the week starting Sunday, April 16th. Looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean, we see the start of a gale pattern developing over the dateline and expected to build while pushing to the east. This is maybe the last significant pulse of swell activity for this season. As usual, we'll start this week's tour looking at jet stream level winds. These winds, up about 30,000 feet, help support the formation of gales. When those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for troughs, just like that right there. A trough, of course, helps support counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the surface. That's the hallmark of low pressure. And low pressure, of course, generates wind. Wind generates seas. Seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area, generate swell. And swell, when it hits your beach, generates surf. All right, so we have one trough right here and almost a portion of another trough. In fact, there's weather moving into North California right now. Nothing severe, just some drizzle, south winds. So the assumption is there's low pressure in this little mini trough right here. And this trough here, notice it has 150 knot winds sort of pushing into it. So the expectation is that it would be stronger than this one here. Also notice another pocket of winds coming off Japan and a bit of a trough developing there as well. We'll keep our eye on that. Let's roll this thing out. And as expected, sure enough, trough there as we get into Monday, and they build. Broad trough. Also notice here we go. Winds up to, well, what is that, about 170 knots pushing off the Kuril Islands. And still a pretty broad, decent trough Monday in the Gulf of Alaska. We'll just roll this out. The two troughs almost kind of start combining as we get into Wednesday. Still, notice most of the energy is right here north of Hawaii. Good support for gale development relative to Hawaii. And still, weather continuing in the eastern Gulf of Alaska on Wednesday. The Hawaiian trough actually digs in pretty deep. Look at that. Down far to the south. Good circulation likely possible there on Thursday. And yet another trough starts developing, also pushing off Japan. We'll roll this out. You can kind of see what's going on here. Trough here, trough here. Looking, and notice the jet stream's all consolidated too. That really helps support gale development as well. And so we're just rolling here into Saturday, and it's looking very much like a machine, kind of late in the season, but we'll take whatever we can get. So we're into Sunday. We'll just go to the 12Z. We'll maybe get 18Z. There we go. Another trough in the Gulf, one over the dateline. Consolidated flow across, winds to 160 knots or so. Pretty good for April. Now also note though, the seasons are changing, and so that sort of takes some of the coolness out of air here. It is the contrast in cool air to the north, warm air to the south that really helps feed storm development as well. You know, the jet stream helps, but temperature differences also make a difference. And air is not quite as cold to the north now because it is moving into the spring. So the jet stream might make things look a little bit more active than they might be in reality. Let's go take a look down at the surface and see what's scheduled to happen. So here we go. Surface level pressure, surface level winds. All right, now this paints a little bit different picture. High pressure, 1032 millibars over the dateline. Yes, low pressure trying to develop right here. You know, actually, we saw one little piece of low pressure, or we thought low pressure streaming into California, but it really kind of looks like one broad low from this perspective. Anyway, roll this out. Sure enough, low pressure starts developing Sunday night in the Gulf, little patch of 35 knot winds, and a bit of a gradient going on here between high pressure with its clockwise flow here. Low pressure, it's clockwise flow here. The closer these two get together, the tighter the isobars get, meaning the stronger the wind gets. So we'll see how this plays out. 35 knot winds on Monday. Here we go. Another system developing off Kamchatka on Monday, and yet a third system over Japan. We'll just sort of roll this out. Gulf low continues, 35 knot winds. So generally 35 knot winds are good for about a 13-second period swell. So nothing too huge expected, and that system come Tuesday night starts fading off of California, but a new system starts developing, and we saw that in this trough that's sitting right here. We saw that on the upper level chart. Aimed pretty well at Hawaii. Again, 35 knot winds, little patches of 40 knot, but nothing too too strong. Again, moving into the Gulf, another system. Now this system here, notice winds are only 25 knots. You're not going to get much from that, maybe a 10 or 11 second period wind swell. And that lesser period wind swell decays as pretty quickly as it moves away from the fetch area. Anyway, so the Gulf low on Friday still continues. 35 knot winds fading out, lifting to the north. New system developed Saturday. Now notice this, supposedly 45 knot winds, building to 55 knots later Saturday. That would be pretty impressive if it were to occur. Moving to the date lines midday Sunday with still 45 knot winds, but that's, 6-7 days out. Odds of it developing as projected are probably pretty low. Let's go take a look at the wave models. So here we go, NOAA's WaveWatch 3 wave model. So it's really a model of a model that takes wind forecasts from, like the GFS model actually uses a different model, but close enough. GFS model will say, and then projects the effect of those winds on the ocean surface over time. Okay, so it's taking data, the GFS will say wind model, and then using that as input to yet another model to estimate sea heights. The reality is it does a pretty good job. Okay, so we're into Monday. 20-foot seas, says 22-foot seas. Yeah, maybe over one little grid square there. But 20-foot seas, then building into Monday night. Tuesday, a good area of 22, 23-foot seas right there. You see the X and the star. So there's the plus. The X and the plus sign, so that's 23.6-foot seas right at that location. That also happens to be where max winds correspond at 37.37 knots from 282 degrees. Anyway, roll this out. You get the idea. 20-foot seas moving towards California. This should be good for swell by Wednesday night, Thursday, and probably some pretty decent size relative to California. Hawaii now has their system lining up here with 20-foot seas, again, in that steep trough. 20-plus foot seas still aimed at Hawaii. A little bit of more sideband energy come Thursday. Now the focus for this system becomes California again. And we'll see how that continues. Look at that, pretty nice 23 foot seas. The 27-foot seas, they're developing back here. But still, this suggests swell for the weekend for California as well. And then here's our storm that we're not really believing the wind speeds on. With seas forecast, what's that? We'll just go back one more. 39 feet in April. Yeah, that's a little bit suspect, but still looks pretty good if it happens. Good long period swell could result for Hawaii and even some for the U.S. West Coast, though smaller given its much further travel distance. And of course, since it's spring, we need to keep our eye on the southern hemi too. This is where it's possible to get swells both from the north and from the south, and that's exactly what's happening. So we're going back in time. Tuesday night last week, system developed under New Zealand, built 30-foot seas, then started lifting pretty good to the north. And you really want these systems to push north if you want to get swell into Hawaii and California. And for Hawaii, the main window is more back here over New Zealand. When they get, so Hawaii's at like 158, 155 west, so right here. So if they just start lifting northeast here, like this one is doing, and we see seas to 40 feet. This was on Thursday. Most of this energy is going to go Peru, Central America, Mexico, up into California, and just dribbles probably for Hawaii. This system, though, looked pretty good. You saw it lift pretty well to the north. Wasn't a huge system, but did a pretty good job. And then things faded out. And then we'll do a quick scan of what's going on starting today and moving forward. Small gale, northeast or southeast of New Zealand, barely 30-foot seas over a tiny area. That's a long ways away from anybody, and basically tracking to the east. Probably not a whole lot to result from that, but notice, see, it's forecast to reorganize here Monday night, 30-foot seas, maybe some more, what is that, 35, 36-foot seas, maybe a pulse of swell, again, mainly focused on Peru, Central America, but still up into Southern California, some swell could result. Then we'll just roll this out, take a look what's going on. See, it's been a fairly active pattern, a good amount of energy. Now look at this. 40-foot seas forecast. Again, this is the same deal. You're talking a week out. Great Circle Pass here. This is on the Great Circle Path to California. It is blocked by Hawaii relative to New Zealand here. But theoretically, that would be a good pulse of southwest swell when you have 32, 34, 35, let's say, foot seas over a broad area pushing to the northeast. That would be, and with good duration on it, that would result in swell. But again, same deal. It's a week out. Don't believe it yet, but something to keep your eyes on. And yes, it still is snow season, just barely, so we'll take a quick look at precipitation. As we discussed earlier, precip, low pressure. There's a little cell of low pressure at 11 o'clock this morning, California time, producing rain, pushing into San Francisco Bay Area, and expected to make it down to maybe Morro Bay by this evening. Now this, do not believe that. It's bad data from the model we get. But also notice, maybe snow at the highest elevations of Tahoe, but that's about it. Pretty warm system. Roll this out. Continued precipitation into Tuesday. Snow. This looks southern Sierra mainly. And then things settle down. High pressure starts building over California. So that's by about Tuesday or so. And then things pretty much, the snow machine is over. And we'll just roll this out here. 180 hours. High pressure builds in. That likely means north winds along the California coast. And we'll just take a quick look at the snow forecast for the next 3 days for Tahoe. Yeah, a little bit of snow, higher elevations, 5 p.m. Sunday. Notice Kirkwood is higher than the rest of the crest of the resorts here, like Squaw, Sugar Bowl, etc. So the snow level is pretty high. We saw that on the other model. No big surprise there. Rain mainly, except for Kirkwood. Okay, we get into Monday night. Then same sort of thing, kind of a mixed deal until Tuesday. And then some snow starts showing up. And notice, 5.68 inches right at Squaw. So a little blast of snow come early Tuesday morning. And then by the afternoon, that's pretty much it. And we dry out. Total accumulations, Kirkwood, due to their higher elevation, supposedly 24 inches, maybe 15, 16 inches at Sugar Bowl, Squaw. And then you can see for yourself, North Star is not on the crest. It gets just a smidgen less. And then, of course, some tidbit information. We've been posting this on Instagram, but we'll show it here as well. These are major reservoirs, Northern Sierra Precipitation, 8-station index. Here are the 8 stations, so they're all mainly from Tahoe northward. This is the amount of precipitation at those various locations, all summed up together. Gives you a sense of how much precipitation has come in this year. Currently, here's where we are at 90.2 inches, 206% of normal. Now, this index goes back at least 100 years. I would say there might have been some wetter activity in the late 1800s, 1880s, 1890s. There were some major weather events going on then. But in the modern age, this is right now the wettest ever. The previous leader was the Super El Nino of 82, 83 at 88.5 inches. Then we put in some others here just so you could sort of take a look. A 97, 98, the other Super El Nino at 82 inches. And then, let's see, that's about it, really. Here's the dry years. Here's the average. So you get a sense. Now, the other part to notice is look at how wet we are early in the year. So there's yet more precipitation. We saw it on the charts. Maybe another, and notice when you get higher, you get more precipitation. The mountains wring out every drop of precipitation compared to down in the flatlands. So it's not inconceivable we could end up with another couple of inches at least. And who knows what's going to happen when we get into late, somewhere in May or something. So again, a significant rainfall event this year, wettest ever. All right, let's take a look and see what's going on long term, specifically what's happening with the MJO and with the El Nino Southern Oscillation. As usual, we like to monitor the Kelvin wave generation area. So here's the East Pacific, here's the West Pacific, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. From that's New Guinea there, from the far reaches of the West Pacific to about 170 west, so not quite as far as Hawaii. Draw a box around it. We're looking for winds, so actual wind speeds, of course, are from the east. This is from the TAO buoy array, buoys strung across the equator, used for monitoring El Nino. But it is the differences in normal for this time of year, and what we see in the Kelvin wave generation area is basically light west wind anomalies. That's good. That takes warm water that's normally piled up here by all the easterly trades and starts allowing it to migrate this way. If you get enough westerly winds or anomalies over a long enough period of time, you get a Kelvin wave, which is a pocket of warm water that actually falls down below the surface of the ocean, travels the whole way across the Pacific, and then erupts over by the Galapagos and Ecuador, forms like a warm oil, it's like a warm pool on the surface, and that is often how El Nino gets started. So we don't see westerly wind anomalies here enough to suggest Kelvin wave production, but what also happens is when you get these slackening in the trades, it also helps feed the jet stream. And that's exactly what's going on right now. You know, from our previous charts, we saw the jet streams consolidated, doing quite well for this time of year. So that indicates the active phase of the MJO. And of course, the active phase of the MJO feeds storm production. And just looking at wind anomalies, so here we go. Here's Australia. Here's the Philippines here. Of course, South America, Mexico. Kelvin wave generation area. Where's the equator? Right there, from about 135 to 170, so right in this little area here. So we're going back to April 10th. Easterly anomalies, that suggests the inactive phase of the MJO, but notice when we got into about the 12th of April, all of a sudden these yellows, westerly anomalies, start building a little bit more and a little bit more into the 14th. Let's go take a look at the forecast. So here's sort of a zoomed in view, if you will. Okay, the Kelvin wave generation area is basically between these two tick marks going down. Here we go. This is time, back in time, March 17th, moving towards the future. Or towards the current. Yellows and oranges, of course, are westerly anomalies. Blues, purples are easterly anomalies. We want to see westerly anomalies to feed the jet stream. So here we are in April. Little bits of westerly anomalies trying to build in after a very long run of easterly anomalies. Inactive phase of the MJO, one would say, but for the most part it was really La Nina. Even though La Nina is not present in the ocean, it's still hanging on in the atmosphere. It takes a while for the atmosphere to figure out that the ocean isn't in a La Nina configuration anymore. Anyway, so here we are right now, kind of a mixed bag, a little bit of westerly anomalies, a little bit of easterly anomalies, but all of it pretty weak, kind of neutral. Forecast for the next week, oh, there's your tick marks right there, is some weak westerly anomalies moving towards the date line, but not a strong pattern. The suspicion, though, is that the atmosphere right now is poised to start sensing the change that occurred in the ocean, and that oceanic change started January 20th, so January to February, March, April. 3 months later, we're about right on track to see the ocean change. Typically, it's we use thumbnail 3 months roughly for the ocean to for the atmosphere to figure out what if the ocean, once the ocean is changed, for it to sort of pick up on that and then reconfigure itself as well. So we continue our tour looking for signs of the active phase of the MJO, and sure enough here, outgoing long-wave radiation models, this suggests, so this is about sunlight reflectivity off the ocean surface. The less reflectivity means more clouds, means the active phase of the MJO. The more reflectivity, see the oranges here, that's higher numbers, means higher pressure, the inactive phase of the MJO. So right now, a weak active phase of the MJO is in play, forecast to weaken per the statistic model. The dynamic model, which we tend to think is a little bit more accurate, suggests basically this pattern holding for the next 2 weeks. That's what we want to see exactly. Phase diagrams, these tend to, so assume you're looking down on the North Pole of our planet. The active phase of the MJO moves from west, from the Indian Ocean over the maritime continent, over the dateline through the West Pacific, south of the U.S., across the Atlantic on the equator, and then back north of Africa and back into the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot shows you where the active phase is, so it is probably in the East Pacific according to this, but this tends to run we think, about a week ahead of what really is happening at the surface. The forecast, of course, looks, if it's inside this circle, it's considered a very weak, if not almost non-existent active phase. You really want to see it out here for it to be strong. So very weak active phase and collapsing the next 2 weeks per the ECMF model. The GEFS model, basically the ensemble GFS, basically says, no, it's going to hang somewhere in the vicinity, and that's what we saw in the other charts too. Basically a static pattern, weakly active. So two different views of the world. Then the upper level chart, propensity for precipitation, and this runs about 2 weeks ahead of what's really happening down at the surface. Is upper level, way high up in the atmosphere. Right now, active phase suggested roughly East Pacific, fading out through April 26th. Inactive phase building in the West Pacific, going to make its trek across the Pacific through roughly about, let's say, the 6th of May. And then another weak active phase falls in behind that. But our favorite is the CFS model. This is a good long-term model, and the projections are looking rather positive. All right, so past history is down here, and you can see this continued, we'll go way back. You can see continued easterly anomalies. The date line runs right up through here, so this is basically the Kelvin wave generation area. The hard line here is where we are today, and you can just eyeball that and see where we go from easterly anomalies. The forecast is westerly anomalies, pretty much starting now and just getting more intense and going on for the next 3 months. Let's take a look at the MJO. Now notice this, the active phase of the MJO, weak as it is pretty much over the Kelvin wave generation area. It's starting right now, going to continue for the next through, I don't know, about the, let's say the 25th of April or so. And westerly anomalies start building in association with that. Now see, also notice the inactive phase, and a pretty healthy one, is forecast. But the other interesting thing is, look at this, westerly anomalies are supposed to be quite strong, say starting the beginning of May, the first day of May, last day of April. We'll see if this holds on the forecast, but this model has been consistently saying some significant change in the atmosphere is expected, and right in this same time frame is what we're looking here, and it's been pretty static in terms of, consistent in terms of when the transition is going to occur. Anyway, inactive phase of the MJO sets up in May into early June, but notice westerly anomalies persist. Then the active phase comes back in, and westerly anomalies really ramp up. These effectively are westerly wind bursts, as best we can tell right now. If that were to happen, that would feed El Nino. Now, the other thing, though, is there's not a whole lot of warm water. We'll get into that in a minute. Over in the far West Pacific, so even if you have a westerly wind burst, there's not a lot of warm water to support forming a Kelvin wave and migrating to the east, but we'll see. All this is interesting. Anyway, low-pass filter. This is the way you look at the state of El Nino, La Nina. So here is our, I'll call it negative state, low-pass, negative anomalies, if you will, over the Kelvin wave generation area. This is all associated with La Nina, and the positive energy is all sitting over the Indian Ocean right now. But notice, right around this time frame, what are we talking, May 5th or so, somewhere in there, 7th, it's supposed to fade, and look what's supposed, there's all the positive energy that's in the Indian Ocean, boom, instantly is supposed to migrate over to the Kelvin wave generation area, and then negative anomalies are supposed to set up in the Indian Ocean. This would be the theoretical start of a El Nino, and we're talking in the May 20th period, okay? And that's what is the model is picking up on, saying westerly anomalies will continue even despite a inactive phase of the MJO. And then when you get constructive integration of a El Nino base state with the active phase of the MJO, then you get strong westerly anomalies and westerly wind bursts, which then in turn only helps reinforce the El Nino base state. So we are close. We are, what are we, less 3 weeks out or so, 4 weeks out, 3 weeks, let's say, from a transition from a La Nina state to maybe an El Nino state. Something to look forward to. All right, let's take a look at the ocean. What's going on in the ocean? As we said before, the ocean already knows that La Nina is dead. It's just waiting for the atmosphere to pick up on it too, and then the two of them will start working together to really starting to feed the storm track. Now, of course, it's kind of late in the year in terms of doing anything for the jet stream for the North Pacific for the next 2 months. But what we're really talking about is the fall and the winter of this, another 6-9 months out. So anyway, warm water in the West Pacific as expected, but also notice we've been watching this line here, the 26-degree isotherm, and it's been starting to make some moves off to the right, meaning warm water is starting to ease this way. And certainly the 24-degree isotherm is holding its own, at least. Warm water, shallow, but a lot less shallow than it was during La Nina. The peak of La Nina was at March or so a year ago. So things are looking much better. Looking at depth, we see basically no cool water at the surface, warm water in the west, warm water in the east. There was actually some thought that maybe a Kelvin wave has erupted here. The other side of it, though, is, well, what happened is trades just died in this area, and maybe water just heated up on its own, upwelling stopped, and that's what you get. Now, we do have this one pocket. I'm kind of watching this thing here. 2 degrees below normal, but it seems to be held in check. It doesn't seem to be rising to the surface. It's at depth. It's down 100 meters or so. We'll see. Hopefully it won't move towards the surface and completely block the Kelvin wave pathway. So if you have westerly wind anomalies here, the warm water, like warm water here, would travel down and then start working its way up. This appears to be blocking the path a little bit. We'll see what happens. Another view of that suggests actually it is blocking it. This modeled view, a little bit higher resolution, says, yeah, there is something, but this might also just be the upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle. So not unexpected. Upper ocean heat anomalies, upper 300 meters of the ocean, West Pacific here, East Pacific here, back. Okay, it was May. I was saying it was almost a year ago, but La Nina got going May, June 2016. Cool water, you could see it moving from west to east, just basically the exact opposite of El Nino, which would have warm water moving from west to east. It's cool water, but this La Nina pretty much petered out when we got into November, December timeframe. It died. Now here we are, warm water moving west to east. This is perhaps our first Kelvin wave. That was in March, so was that a month ago or so? And now here's that pocket of cool water. Is this the upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle or something else? Probably that's most likely what it is. Notice warm water building here. Is this from the Kelvin wave? Was this from suppressed trades or a combination of both? Not sure, but we know it's here, and that's a good thing. Then sea level anomalies. Here's South America. Here's Australia here. Dateline here. Equator here. What we're looking for, or what we're looking at, strip out all the waves, strip out the tides, strip out the chop. And what you have is there's bulges in the ocean surface, 5 centimeters right here. What that typically means is there's warm water at depth. Warm water at depth, of course, expands a little. That creates a little bulge on the ocean surface. We had negative anomalies all in here during La Nina. That's all gone now. Now warming along the South American coast. This is probably that pocket of cool water, minus 5 centimeters. Not that big of a deal. And it's really only right along in the equator that we're interested in. So this pretty much correlates quite well with all the other data we've been seeing. All right, surface temperature anomalies. So what we see, warm water, of course, along Chile, Peru, but just off the coast, right along the coast, there is some upwelling going on. This has been going on for a week or two, week and a half, right close to the coast, but it's been eroding. These dark reds were much broader in aerial coverage around here 2 weeks ago. It's gotten dampened a little bit, so we're in the spring unpredictability barrier right now between March and the end of May. it can look like El Nino is going to form, and then it can just as easily disappear, and we're right in the middle of that. And it looks like El Nino is trying to form, but this could just as easily disappear. And notice a lot of this warm water, yes, some of it's trying to migrate into the Nino 3.4 region. The Nino, which is basically Nino 1.2 here, which is very noisy, can do a lot of stuff, but the main area for monitoring El Nino is out here. 120 west out to 170 west and 5 degrees north and south of the equator. So the Kelvin wave generation area is off the chart there. Then there's the Nino 3.4 region for monitoring El Nino, and the two of those sort of work together. Now, in terms of precipitation for California, the more warm water you have here close to South America, the greater the potential in the winter during El Nino years to get precipitation. So what was that? The 2015-16 El Nino? Yeah, we got rain, but it was just sort of like a normal year. It wasn't any big deal. That's because all the warm water was out here. It wasn't up. It was a westward displaced El Nino. Even though it was a super El Nino, westward displaced. So it didn't really have that much of an effect on precipitation relative to California. Anyway, looking at the trend 7 days out, or the past 7 days, we see cooling here again. Remember, I was saying it was noisy. We see little pockets of warming along southern Peru here, but there's been this persistent cooling thing going on. Now, let's be clear, temperatures were very warm here, so when it says cooling, all it's saying is cooler relative to what it was, but it was baking hot. Floods in Peru associated with all that. Now things are settling down a little bit. We don't know where it's going to go, but still pretty warm here. Warming trend still going on out from 120 west on out to the date line. Also, we had this line of really warm water going from California the whole way over to the Philippines. That has moderated too, of course, with spring and high pressure and lots of north wind. That causes upwelling, kind of a normal thing. The lingering parts of that pattern still persist here. And then a quick look at the overview. Of course, warm water, again, of course, warmer than normal along Peru, out over the Galapagos, out to we'll say 160 west. That's pretty healthy. Certainly no signs of La Nina, and this has been going on for 2 or 3 months now. That's why we're saying the projections of of the atmosphere changing and picking up on this warm water signal, because it's been holding and building for 3 months now. Certainly the atmosphere should change from a La Nina dominated cycle to at least a neutral cycle. Quick look at the temperature trend for the past 5 days. I guess there was some sort of issue at this website, but they've got things resolved now. They're tracking temperature. Right now, what is that? Minus 0.197, so basically neutral. The Nino 1.2 region up there by the Galapagos and Ecuador, pretty much neutral. And basically the same setup for Nino 3.4, which is the main area for monitoring El Nino, plus 1/3 of a degree, maybe 1/4 of a degree. So basically neutral. So we've talked about the ocean, we've talked about the atmosphere above it, but let's look at some indices to see really another way, try to dimension exactly what's going on in the atmosphere. So this is the Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. When it's negative over a prolonged period of time, that means at least the active phase of the MJO. Over a longer period of time, then it means El Nino. Positive numbers mean La Nina, or the inactive phase of the MJO. So we've kind of had a mixed bag. So we're just going back March 31st here. A little run of negative numbers, another little run of positive numbers. Now we're very negative. That's probably due to low pressure or a tropical storm somewhere. Minus 35.76. That's great. If it held like that for another 15 or 20 days, then we'd say, the active phase of the MJO is here. But right now, the daily index is very noisy. 30-day running average gives you a better picture of what's going on. It says, on average, we're at minus 0.65, so effectively zero, neutral. The 90-day running average, a little bit more negative, minus 2. But if you're looking for El Nino, this needs to be down around minus 15 at least. And we're not there yet. We're, basically all this is saying is, we're making the transition from La Nina to a normal pattern, and we're not at El Nino yet. Here's the 30-day average on a graph so you can sort of see what's going on. You can see here was our El Nino down -15, -20, down to almost -25 at times in the peak of El Nino of winter of 2015-2016. Then our La Nina in the fall of 2016, and here we are right now, still on this one. It says +3. The index, this data set and the other data set are a little bit out of sync, but still basically saying neutral, but I'd say neutral, trending. Yeah, you could draw a line through this and say the trend is down. So we're just moving towards neutral. We're not anywhere close to being in El Nino territory yet. And then the ESPI index, which is basically like the Southern Oscillation Index, instead of measuring differences in pressure north of Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti, it measures differences in precipitation. Negative values in the index suggest drier than normal conditions here, which of course is La Nina. Wetter than normal conditions here. This is roughly the Nino 3.4 region, corresponds to El Nino. The current index -1.06. So what we're saying, and you can see it here, rainfall anomalies last 30 days, pretty dry in this region still. So this suggests that La Nina is still hanging on in the atmosphere. But as we've seen, we expect this in the next couple of weeks to start making a major trend towards at least neutral, and then we'll see where things go from there. So this is more of a lagging indicator. So to wrap things up, North Pacific has not given up. Jet stream looking pretty solid at the moment. Series of gales forecast, not particularly strong, but good enough to generate probably 13-second period swell, maybe more. And if one believes the models, a strong system is forecast pushing off Japan. We don't believe it. Likewise, Southern Hemisphere coming online. Series of small swells working their way up into areas that will be protected from the north swells. So you'll see some of that energy as well. And again, the forecast is, more to come. So that's good. MJO activity, MJO. Weekly active right now, trying to make the turn. And El Nino, no, we're not in El Nino, but we're making the transition as well towards neutral with the models and a pretty good consensus of models. We didn't go into that, but a lot of models from other sources all suggesting some sort of weak El Nino forming long term. That's kind of interesting that we would have a major El Nino, what is it, basically a year ago, and then go into La Nina, and then turn right back around and go back into El Nino. That suggests that there is latent heat energy built up in the oceans and in the atmosphere that still has yet to be released and needs to be released so that the atmosphere can return to a homeostatic position, or something at least that approximates it. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes, but right now it looks like we're through the worst of it. We've suffered through our La Nina winter, and it really wasn't that bad of a La Nina winter, because certainly we scored on precipitation relative to California, got us out of the drought, 208% of normal, and piles of snow. So it's been overall, if you didn't surf, but you went skiing or boarding, you did well this winter. So that's it for this week. We'll do it again next week. Same time, same channel. We'll see what happens with the transition towards at least the demise of La Nina. Thanks for watching.